And welcome back to Your View with me, JJ Tawan. We're coming to you live from Linden here in Johannesburg. President in his State of the National Address underlined the issue of a reading culture, the reading culture. And I think it was not by accident, because all reports over the years have shown us that we are at the bottom of the scale when it comes to numeracy and literacy, and that's a worrying fact. And the President's called on all of us to see what we can do to contribute to that culture of reading. And this month, the National Education Collaboration Trust will be launching an initiative of nature, and its CEO, Godwin Khosa, joins me to come and talk about the debate. How are you?
I'm fine, JJ. How are you?
All right.
Good.
Hey, this is a crisis, eh? The reading thing is a big crisis, man. What are we going to do?
So crisis, you say. So when you are faced with those kind of staggering figures of kids who can't read with meaning, you have a number of options. One of those is to throw your hands in the air.
Yeah.
The other is to point fingers. And of course the other range of constructive things that you can do. You kind of fold your sleeves and get down to work. And that's the option that we have chosen.
Yeah.
So, indeed, when that statistic was released in 2017, December, I listened very carefully to the range of responses that were given from government, NGOs, universities, parents, whoever. They were all different. They were all different. So the National Education Collaboration Trust, which I work for, the board asked us what we're going to do about it. We've been working with teachers and all sorts of things. When we saw that statistic, they said, what are you going to do about it? Unfortunately, the Minister of Basic Education is one of the board members. But she sits around the same table with like senior business people, senior labor people, senior civil society people, and they're able to converse, openly in the interest of the country. And that question was posed: what are we going to do with this situation? So we indeed went away to go and look at what the situation looks like. There's bad and good things that are happening in that space. I can tell you that there are so many South Africans who are involved in one way or another in promoting reading. But unfortunately, they're stepping on top of each other or competing.
So there's no coordination.
There's no coordination.
Effort.
There's no coordination of effort. So indeed, when we came back, we said, hey, there's so many South Africans with good hearts who are helping, working alongside with government to help, but there's no coordination. And we said, what we need to try and do is to improve the coordination. And that was the birth of the National Reading Coalition.
Okay.
So immediately, those people who make a living out of reading, or they think that reading is a pet project, and I was like, no. We said, listen, this is not a project. And neither is it a program. But it's a coalition.
It doesn't replace what you are doing.
It doesn't replace. If anything, it connects the nodes. So that in the end, we have one comprehensive response as South Africans, as a nation.
What is, take me into it, what would be that response? Because I'm trying to gauge what kind of impact you're planning to make and over how long. So
if you have a car that's not performing well, it doesn't take off quickly, or it overheats and so on, you got to look at the entire system and see which parts aren't working. So we have identified 6 areas that need improvement. The first is initial teacher preparation. So how we prepare teachers from universities to teach reading, right? Because we take it light that anybody can teach reading. No. It's a technical exercise. It's got to be taught on how we do it. It's even more complex in African languages, because African languages are organized differently from, English and Afrikaans, and amongst themselves, the differences. The second one is how we jack up the efforts that we're making in training the 433,000 teachers that make up our system. So they are already waking up every morning and going to schools. They've got to be helped to know, how to teach reading. Thirdly, is to make sure that we have age and language relevant material that excite the kids to read, that actually induct and introduce and kind of grow the kids to read. I mean, if you took the New King James Bible and gave it to a baby, you're frustrating their interest and potential to read.
Yeah.
But we have, age, relevant material.
Yeah.
The fourth is to mobilize community, society to support what happens in the school. That is often taken very lightly because most of the time when people talk about reading, they only stop at the micro understanding of reading, the technical sense of reading. So how kids actually break into the code made up of letters and words and so on. That's the most elementary. And that has to be taught in the classroom. But there are other levels. So I listen to you, even though you get very emotional, but I can see this man reads, So I can tell that this guy is a critical reader. He doesn't just read and believes what people tell him. So he reads a lot and he becomes a critical reader, which is the highest level. So that's to suggest that reading is not an activity that's limited to the classroom and the kids. It's a societal thing. So even if the teachers were to teach reading well in the classrooms, the minute the kids leave the school and go home, there's no reading.
Ish.
There's no reinforcement of that. Even the parents don't read, right?
Yeah.
So
but they're still be told to do the homework with the kids.
Well,
I want to come to that a little bit to say, how can the parents be part of the effort when some of them may themselves be illiterate?
Well, we can talk about that. Let me finish this area.
There's 6 areas. Yes, there's 2 more.
Then there's the fifth one, it's policy.
Yeah.
So policy is the way in which society organizes how we behave as individuals, kind of controlled by the state.
Yeah.
But, it's a common law that we use. And policy must never be developed and put away. Policy must be engaged with on an ongoing basis because it must reinforce certain behaviors.
Yes.
And in fact, it must be changed and tweaked on an ongoing basis. So we're saying these policies on languages, we all have to talk about them. The teacher, the official in the department, the parent, the radio station, we must all understand what having 11 official languages, what it means, what opportunities we're creating for all these languages and those sorts of things. And then the last one is research, monitoring, and evaluation. If you were to do these things well, you're going to have targets. You must collect data on whether you're making it or not.
Yeah.
And, introduce corrections, along the way and so on. So we have proposed the 6 areas to both government and civil society. And because we work with business, unions, civil society, and so on, we've brought them along to the government. And we said the first thing we need to do is we must all focus on this, and we must break the wall between government and non-governmental initiatives so that we have one initiative as a country, right? One response. Nobody throws their hands in the air. Nobody stops and points a finger. We all get down to work. So that's the comprehensive response that we are pushing.
Sounds interesting. I want us to pick a few of these 6. It's good that you mentioned them because then we can structure our conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
I went to a high school where there was a library.
Yeah.
Right? Apparently, there's 80% of our schools don't have. And the other 20 that they have, half of those libraries either don't have the necessary books, or they've got incomplete material, or age-irrelevant material. It's actually a very serious situation. I'm wondering where that fits in because it creates infrastructure for the culture to develop.
Absolutely.
Community libraries, mobile libraries.
Absolutely.
And now with the age of internet and 4IR, maybe people can argue that virtual libraries. Where will that fit in? Will it fit under policy or where?
So it will fit under materials. So making provision for age and language relevant material.
To be accessible.
To be accessible to learners. And teachers.
Yeah.
And even adults. So we're saying teachers can't teach reading if they don't read themselves. So if teachers are going to teach reading, they must be critical readers.
Yeah.
They must be at a higher level.
Yeah.
But, if we don't say these things and if we don't agree as a nation to start, it just never happens.
Absolutely. But in your assessment, and if you have not come to that point, I'm happy to accept. But in your assessment, have you made an analysis of whether or not that situation, this statistic about 80% is probably 4 years old.
Yeah.
And I doubt it has changed much, but
So
I'm happy to be proved wrong.
It has somewhat changed.
Somewhat.
It's at somewhat changed. I don't have the latest statistics. But we suggested to government and our partners that in order to do this thing well in a sustainable way, let's start in 25% of the education circuits.
25%?
25%, a quarter.
Yes.
So we have about 1,000 circuits in the country.
Okay.
So we're saying, don't spread this thing too thinly so that you end up giving one book, one child.
Yeah.
A child must read like 20, 30 books and so on, So let's go deep. Let's go deep in 25% of the circuit. Let's evaluate and see what happens before we rush into the others. So in those...
Where you're going to do it, where you're going to try to implement most of these pillars. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
in other words, the campaign we focused on it on 25 and then be grown later.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in those 25% of the circuits, we have started profiling in greater detail, in depth, what books are in the schools, to what extent these books are used, and so on. So the challenge is big. So one of it is attitudinal. So I can remember the books Shangaan books that I read when I was young. I mean, those books have relevant words. The words that make up those texts haven't lost value.
Absolutely.
But schools have the culture of taking these books and putting them away, or even throwing them away. That's text. We shouldn't be throwing it away.
It's shocking. But also, while talking about culture, right? As I was saying, I was going to tell you a story when I was saying I went to a high school where there was a library. So there was a culture of going there and they say go and research. And this is, I mean, matric, standard 9. So I get to university and I learned something shocking. My first assignment comes very red all over with the lecturer saying, but where do these things come from? I said, no, I went to the library. During our days, there used to be something called overhead project. So they write, then you must take the notes. And then they give you an assignment. They expect you to regurgitate that. So coming from a culture of being in a library, I go to the library, research, and say, I know these things, and I'm going to add these books. And I got a red mark to say, no, we've researched that whole library. So now they are picturing in their minds, these people are from a place where there's no library. So I'm not going to bother. Right? So this is not just about primary school. It's about the fact that that culture of non-reading or a culture of not reading critically, as you have put it, then it's graduated with the kids into university.
So the word to use there, it got institutionalized in an institution of higher learning where it was not supposed to be. In fact, you should have gotten 101 out of 100 if you went and researched these things, out there. But let me come back to the material. The thing about material has a number of dynamics. One of those is the value chain through which materials are produced and made available to learners. There's a whole lot of things that have to be fixed there. So if you take African language materials, there's some people who are very passionate about writing these stories and making them available, but very few of those participate downstream in the publication and in the commercial, beneficiation, of it and so on. And what it does, it discourages them from writing because they get the peanuts, they don't see the bigger, benefits and so on. So these are some of the things that we have to fix as a nation. Right?
I want to talk a little more about that after the break because it triggers another issue of decolonization of education. Right? So we're going to get people to read and so on. Is there enough material that is relevant? You talked about age relevance, but what about cultural relevance of material that people are going to be using? And maybe a reading campaign could be an opportunity to also teach people history and so on in their language, written by people, the oral tradition thing being translated into print, etc. We'll talk about that after the break. If you've just joined us, we're talking about reading culture with Mr. Khosa, who joins me now on our Newsmaker tonight. Stay tuned.